Mary was only 7 when she learned that silence could hurt more than shouting. There was no storm that night. There was no slammed doors, no plates breaking. There was just the heavy quiet of 2 people sitting across from each other, strangers in a marriage that used to feel safe. She remembered sitting at the dinner table, swinging her legs under the chair, tracing the edge of her cup, while her parents talked in voices that didn't sound like them anymore. They were polite, and as far as Mary could remember, they were never this polite before. They said things like, "Let's do what's best for everyone." And even though she was only 7, Mary could tell the air had changed. That night, she fell asleep to the sound of running water in the kitchen. The next day, she didn't see her dad at home. He didn't even bother to say goodbye. When she asked, her mother told her the news. In Tete, her dad had moved out of their home, and that she'd be spending some time at her father's new apartment. And that's when the ground under her small world cracked quietly. The thing about Mary's story is, she's not alone. Every year, millions of children grow up in homes divided by silence. Some call it divorce, but for the child, it feels like something else entirely, a kind of invisible earthquake. The house still stands. The toys are still in place. The lunch boxes are still packed. But something fundamental has shifted. Something in the air has changed. Something in the heart no longer feels safe. Psychologists say that when a child witnesses divorce, what breaks first isn't trust in their parents. It's trust in permanence. That quiet belief that love does not last. Mary didn't understand the word divorce when she first heard it. All she knew was that now there were 2 homes, 2 routines, 2 versions of breakfast, and 2 different versions of her. At her mother's house, she was careful. She smiled more, made sure her mother didn't look too sad. At her father's house, she laughed louder, even when she didn't feel like it. She wanted him to think she was okay. Inside her little backpack, she carried pajamas, a toothbrush, a stuffed rabbit, and a quiet weight, too heavy for a child to name. And then the confusion set in. Should she tell Mom that Dad took her to the park? Should she tell Dad that Mom cried herself to sleep almost every night? This quiet, self-editing psychologists call it loyalty conflict. It's the emotional tug-of-war that happens when a child feels torn between 2 worlds that both claim to love them. And that's where it begins the habit of filtering joy so it doesn't become someone else's pain. By 10, Mary had become a master at reading the emotional weather in each home. She could tell from her father's sigh how his day went. She could tell from her mother's tone if mentioning him was safe. She learned to tread softly, like life was a floor full of creaking boards. Psychologists call this hypervigilance, the nervous system's way of staying alert for emotional danger. Children of divorce often become watchers, interpreters of silence, keepers of peace. And while this can make them empathetic, it also trains them to believe peace is something you earn by staying small. But here's the paradox. Children like Mary, the ones who grew up split between homes, often grow into adults who are remarkably strong. They adapt fast. They read rooms easily. They know how to blend, how to manage, how to hold everything together. But that strength, it came at a cost. Because to survive instability, Mary learned to shrink herself, to always be calm, to never need too much. That's what psychologists call the parentified child, the child who becomes the emotional adult too early, the helper, the fixer, the one who comforts everyone else even when she's the one breaking inside. At 12, Mary began asking herself quiet questions she couldn't voice. Was it my fault? Did I do something wrong? If I had been better, would they have stayed? Developmental psychology tells us that children under 10 often internalize divorce as something they caused, because children think in black and white. If love disappeared, someone must have done something wrong. And since the adults won't admit fault, The child quietly volunteers to carry it. Mary carried that weight like a secret through middle school, through adolescence, through every moment she felt like she had to be perfect just to be safe. When she turned 15, something else began to surface: anger, but she didn't know how to express it, because for years, she had been the peacemaker. When her mom cried, she comforted her. When her dad looked guilty, she told him it was okay. But inside, she was screaming. She just didn't know it yet. That buried rage, the kind that's born from silence, often turns inward. It becomes anxiety. It becomes perfectionism. It becomes that quiet voice that says, "Don't mess up. You can't afford to lose love again." By the time Mary reached college, her body had become fluent in tension, tight shoulders, restless sleep, always waiting for something to go wrong. Psychologists say this is common in children from fractured homes. They grow up believing love is conditional, that belonging must be earned, that peace is temporary. So, they become overachievers. They build perfect grades, perfect relationships, perfect lives, anything to keep the chaos away. But perfection isn't peace. It's fear dressed up nicely. Mary dated a few times. She was kind, loyal, steady, but deep down, she was terrified. Terrified of being left, terrified of being too much, terrified of repeating the story that once broke her. One night, her boyfriend said something small, something like, "You don't have to fix everything, you know." And Mary froze. Because fixing was how she loved. It was how she stayed safe. It was how she proved her worth. But underneath it, she didn't feel loved, she felt needed. And those are not the same thing. Eventually, the anxiety got to her, and she sought therapy. The first session, she realized that she wasn't broken. She was conditioned to read pain, to fix it, to earn safety through service. Psychologists call this fawning a trauma response where people please to stay safe. It's common among children from unstable homes. They learn early that approval keeps the peace. So they keep giving even when it costs them everything. Mary was exhausted. But therapy taught her something new. Love isn't earned, it's received. And that realization began to change everything. As she grew older, Mary began to see her childhood differently, not as a tragedy, but as a training ground for empathy. Because children of divorce don't just learn pain, they learn perception. They notice the pauses, the tones, the hidden emotions in a room. They feel what others feel before words are even spoken. It's why so many become counselors, mediators, artists, healers. They've spent their whole lives studying human emotion just to survive it. But that same sensitivity can turn inward into anxiety, overthinking, self-blame. Because when you grow up managing everyone's emotions, your own often become strangers to you. By 25, Mary had learned to finally listen to herself. She stopped apologizing for existing, stopped explaining her worth, stopped making herself small for people who mistook her silence for strength, stopped blaming herself for her parents' divorce, and slowly, something beautiful began to happen. She started to feel safe, not because life was perfect, but because she was no longer performing peace. There's something psychologists call post-traumatic growth, the idea that pain, when processed, can deepen a person's capacity for empathy, wisdom, and love. Mary was living proof of that. She became someone who could sit with people in their pain without needing to fix it, someone who could love deeply without losing herself, someone who finally understood that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of self-trust. But let's not romanticize it. Children of divorce still wrestle with certain ghosts. commitment fears, attachment wounds, a quiet ache that asks, will this last? Even in adulthood, those patterns echo. You can hear them in the way Mary sometimes panicked when someone didn't text back, in the way she braced for endings even when things were going well, in the way she tried to anticipate rejection before it happened. This is called anticipatory anxiety, the nervous system's way of preparing for heartbreak before it comes. It's not self-sabotage, it's self-protection, learned too early. But awareness changes everything. The moment Mary saw these patterns for what they were, defense, not destiny, she stopped fighting herself. She learned that her fear of abandonment wasn't weakness. It was loyalty to the little girl who once watched her family fall apart. So she stopped shaming her fears and started holding them. That's what healing looks like. Years later, Mary said something to a friend that summed it all up. I used to think I was broken because of what happened between my parents. But now I see, I just love them so much. I try to hold both worlds together. And maybe that's why I learned to hold people the way I do now. That's the psychology of a child from a divorced home. They're not fragile. They're forged. Not broken, just shaped by love that didn't stay, but still mattered. Psychologists describe this as earned security, when someone who once felt unsafe in love learns, through awareness and connection, to build safety from within. Mary did that. Slowly, gently, imperfectly. She still has moments where the old fear returns, when someone raises their voice, when a goodbye feels too long. But now, instead of shrinking, she breathes. She reminds herself that she's not that little girl anymore. She's grown, and she's safe. So what really happens to kids of divorced parents? They grow up learning that love is complicated, that good people can still hurt each other, that forever doesn't always mean what we thought it did. But if they heal, they also grow up with an incredible gift, the ability to love consciously. Because when you've seen what silence can destroy, you learn to build relationships out of truth. When you've watched love fade without explanation, you learn the importance of communication. And when you've lived between two worlds, you learn to create your own. Mary once said, I used to wonder if love could survive imperfection. Now I think love is imperfection held gently. That's the wisdom that grows out of fracture. That's what psychology calls integration, when the broken pieces no longer define you. They simply belong to your story. If you grew up like Mary, moving between homes, managing emotions too big for your age, wondering if you caused it, wondering if you'll ever feel safe, this story is for you because you didn't cause it. You just love deeply in a world that's split in two. And now, you get to rebuild. Not as the peacemaker, not as the perfect child, but as the adult who finally knows you don't have to earn stability anymore. You can create it. The psychology of a child with divorced parents isn't a story of damage. It's a story of depth, of growing up between two truths, and learning to live fully in one heart. Because sometimes, the children who watched love fall apart are the ones who learn best how to keep it alive.